The HoneyDew with Ryan Sickler.
Welcome back to the HoneyDew, y'all. We're over here doing it in the Night Pants Studios. I'm Ryan Sickler, RyanSickler.com, Ryan Sickler on all your social media. And as I say every week, thank you. Thank you for watching this show. Thank you for supporting this show. Please subscribe. Tell everybody about it. It's the free way to help the show, all right? If you got to have more, then you got to check out the Patreon. The Patreon is called The HoneyDew with Y'all. And I do the same thing with y'all. And y'all got the wildest stories I've ever. We just had a guy on who his parachute didn't open. And homeboy hit the ground and lived. We had an old aunt and uncle get taken hostage. And the uncle got away, got a gun, and subscribe. And you'll hear how the rest of that goes. It's $5 a month. That's it. There's no tiers, no levels. If you sign up for a year, you get like a month of episodes for free. You get the HoneyDew a day early. You get it ad-free at no additional cost. All right. And if you or someone you know has a story that has to be heard, please submit it to honeydewpodcast@gmail.com. All right. Thank you guys for supporting the special Lefty Son. It's up there. Go watch it, share it, comment on it. And if you're looking for a new podcast to listen to, I'm telling you, go listen to my old podcast that I used to do with Jay Larson called The Crab Feast. It's every single person you know and love in podcasting. Tom Segura, Bert Kreischer, Christina P. They're all on there with different stories. It's a great, fun podcast. All right. August 18th and 19th, I'm in Tampa. Steve Simone will be joining me for that. September 1st and 2nd, Springfield, Missouri. September 15th and 16th, we're in Tulsa. And September 29th and 30th is Pheonix. October 27th, 28th, Salt Lake City. And December 8th and 9th, San Francisco, California. All right. All your tickets are at RyanSickler.com. Now, that's the biz, and you guys know what we're doing over here. We're highlighting the lowlights. All right. I always say these are the stories behind the storytellers. And I'm very excited to have this guest on here. First time on the HoneyDew. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jim Gaffigan. Welcome to the HoneyDew, Jim Gaffigan.
Thank you so much.
I want to bring you in strong, Jim Gaffigan.
That was a good one.
You don't even know, dude. First, before we even get into everything we're going to talk about, please plug, promote everything and anything Jim Gaffigan that you'd like. And I know there's a lot.
Well, I mean, I guess, I have this new Amazon special that is begins streaming on July 25th. It's my 10th comedy special.
It's amazing.
Right? I'm an old man.
Dude, that's nuts. 10.
Yeah, right? Isn't that crazy? And then I I'm on tour this fall with the Barely Alive tour, which is different material than that. And then
I'm the Live and Alive tour. You're the Barely Alive.
And then in this new Max mini series called Full Circle, which and I get to play a postal inspector. And it's a Steven Soderbergh show, so it's good stuff. And Zazie Beetz and Claire Danes and Timothy Oliphant and I can't think of some of the other names. And then I'm doing some dates this fall with a young comedian named Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh yeah, that kid.
So
I heard good things about him.
Doing Chicago, San Francisco, St. Louis, and LA. But I'm excited to be here. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like I'm meeting the mayor of Maryland.
Well, I said to you, so first of all, I'm a huge, huge fan, and I'm beyond respectful. And I pay attention to the game, and I had released a comedy album out, and for a hot second, it bumped you down to number 2 for 10 seconds. And you started following me on Twitter, and I was like, wow, Jim Gaffigan fucking followed me. And then the night that I met you at the Comedy Store, which has been a second now, they'd say Gaffigan's coming on. I'm like, oh my God, I fucking love Jim Gaffigan. I can't wait. And you come through the back, and I have been standing out the doorway on Sunset smoking a joint. I was not expecting you to be there that quickly. And when you come through, I was like, hey, Jim, I'm Ryan. I shake your hand. You're like, oh, you're from Baltimore, right? And I was floored by that. Yeah. But also, I felt so self-conscious and terrible because I blew weed smoke all over Jim Gaffigan. This is my first meeting. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, my God. Then we go back, we talk, we hang out. You tell me a great Dave Attell joke that I still repeat. Do you remember it?
No.
Do you want to tell it? Will you tell it
Which
if I
one
tell
is
you?
it?
It's the Hitler at the Halloween
Oh my
party,
God, that's
dude.
an amazing. That's an
I
amazing
tell
joke.
everybody. You want to tell
That's
it?
an amazing. You tell it.
I'll see if I can remember it. So there's a guy who's throwing a Halloween party,
Right.
and everyone's hanging out, having a great time. They're drinking, dancing, partying. It's a good time. The dude's going around making sure. He's like, oh, great. And then across the way, he sees a guy who looks identically like Adolf Hitler.
He's dressed like Hitler.
And he's like, what the fuck is this guy doing at my Halloween party dressed like Hitler? So he goes over to say something. So he's like, hey, man, you can't wear that here. You can't be here like that. And he's like, what if I tell you that I'm actually Adolf Hitler and I've returned to kill 10,000 Jews,
6 million more Jews,
6 million more Jews,
and
three clowns. Okay, I go with 2, but I'm going to change it up. What if I'm here to tell you I'm here to kill 6 million more Jews and 3 clowns? And he's like, what? He goes, I'm actually Adolf Hitler. I'm back from the dead. I'm here to kill 6 million more Jews and 3 clowns. And the guy goes, why 3 clowns? And Hitler's like, see, no one gives a shit about the Jews.
It's unbelievable.
I tell everybody, I'm like, Jim Gaffigan is telling me a Dave Attell joke like that. You're like, Dave Attell told me that. I'm like, Jesus, even better.
Right.
So a great time meeting you. And then my brother's like, I'm pretty sure I've seen him in church in Maryland. I'm like, I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe his wife. And now you're telling me before we started recording, you actually do have people there?
No. My mom's family is from Iowa, but my grandfather got a job in D.C. and so my aunt lived in Maryland. She lived on the Eastern Shore for years. And so I've been going to Maryland every summer for like, I don't know, my entire life, for like a week and eating, like the crabs and the, like there's so many, Maryland is such a unique microcosm in itself,
100%,
right?
It is.
And so
this little tiny state that's got all these things: mountains, a dangerous city, the bay, the ocean, the crabs, the seafood. It's wild.
It was like a border state, but it really wasn't a border state. It's the fact you say y'all, it's Southern, right?
And hun and
but so there's the family connection, but also, when my wife and I started having kids, we ended up meeting this other couple that ended up, because I have 5 kids. And so this other couple ended up having 5 kids. And the husband is from Maryland. Is from Baltimore too. So we ended up, the Maryland connection was so consistent. And then, and it's just the proximity.
Yeah, I mean, it's not far from New York.
It's the start of the I call the Northeast corridor, that Acela line, I call that the corridor of hate, because everyone is so angry on that line, right?
It's so true.
It's kind of,
it's about how many fights I've been in the state of Maryland. It's an angry place.
Oh my gosh. I remember one time we were on the Eastern Shore, and my wife and our friend, the wife of my friend, were in the bathroom, and we were in this bar that was kind of empty, and this woman came in and tried to start a fist fight with them. It's like these are the mothers of 5 children. It was not a seedy
She's like,
bar.
I got 9.
Yeah, it was just this woman was on a tear, but it's the whole Northeast is like that. In
Boston,
Nantucket,
everybody's angry.
Like I remember one time I was in Nantucket and for some festival thing, and my wife and I were in a bar, and we're like, "This is very preppy." And I was like, "What's that bell for?" And they're like, "Well, when there's a fight, we ring the bell so the bouncers know to come in." And I'm looking around, and it's all just rich people in preppy outfits, and I'm like, "How often?" Ding, ding, ding.
No.
And there's just these guys in like these Nantucket pink pants punching each other. And you're like, what is going on? What is
Corridor of Hate is such
Right?
it's such a great name. All the way up Philly.
Yeah.
Philly. Fucking New York, Jersey.
Long Island.
Yeah, all the way up. You're not
all
wrong.
the way up.
Yeah,
you
you're
know,
right.
New
That's
Haven.
good.
It's just combat.
Yeah.
Providence. You know.
So tell me about your upbringing. You're from Indiana originally. That's where you're
Yes.
born and raised too?
I
Or did
was
you bounce
born
around
in
a lot?
Illinois, but we moved to Indiana when I was in the middle of 5th grade. My dad got fired and he got a job in Indiana.
What was he doing in Illinois?
He was a banker. He was, I think he kind of told his boss to fuck off.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, now you do that and people are like, you know, you shouldn't do that. And back then people were like, you're gone. And so, but I think he didn't get a promotion and he was really pissed. And so he got a different job in Northwest Indiana. And Northwest Indiana, it's like hard to describe. It is, I mean, I have such affinity for Northwest Indiana, but it is the stepchild of Chicago. Like people, I used to have a joke when I would perform in Chicago where you tell someone from Chicago, because it goes Chicago and then Northwest Indiana is right there. And if you said, hey, I'm from Northwest Indiana, people in Chicago would be like, where's that? You're like, it's 15 minutes away.
Yeah.
But it was such kind of like the area of riffraff. And also like when I would do shows in Chicago, I could always tell when there were people from Northwest Indiana because I do meet and greets after the show. And they would be in sweatpants. It would be like Saturday night. And they're like showing up in sweatpants.
But they're good sweats, though.
They're good.
Yeah.
They're good sweats. But they're like,
sweats.
you know, this. I'm not at work.
Yeah.
I'm going to a show.
Yeah.
But so I grew up. I identify as someone from Northwest Indiana, which is the Calumet region, which is different from real Indiana. Like people think of real Indiana as, you know, the whole, it's so like Northwest Indiana is kind of a mix of a lot of, you know, Gary, African-American city, ethnocentric, ethnic Catholics, you know, Eastern European, you know, Mexican. And so I had moved from Chicago, which was kind of the this lily white suburb of Chicago, to Northwest Indiana. So it was a culture shock, and it was pretty brutal. It was a pretty rude awakening. Like I think I was like the strongest kid in 5th grade, and then I arrived and I was like nothing. And so that's where I think I really
Is that your 6th grade, basically your middle school years you start in Indiana?
Yeah, in the middle of 5th grade. And I had some jokes that we, you know, you learn as little kids. So I was trying to get an adjective before pale. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was like the funny pale kid.
Right.
You know, that new pale kid.
Yeah, the new pale kid.
You know, so it's that new real white kid. So I was trying to add an adjective.
I always say when they're that white, they're white. You got to hit the H on that. Like he's white. Yeah.
And so it was strangely informative to how my whole life would go. So it's like that's where I really felt like an outsider, ironically, you know, obviously compared to like someone who's truly been like oppressed, it's nothing. But like I was, so I had to develop I had always been funny, but like comedy was a tool to kind of gain approval. I had used it for, you know, being the youngest of 6 kids to kind of, because it was just combat for food when I was growing up. You know what I mean? Like my parents were there, but it was not like what we see today. It was, you know, like I know where my kids are at all times. I know when their sporting things are happening.
And specifically versus like, oh, they're out playing.
Versus see you at 6 p.m.
Yes, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Do you ever deal with the parents? I don't mean to interrupt you, but this trips me out. Once I had a kid, I started realizing there's different styles of parenting. Like I remember going to a 3-year-old's birthday party. We're taking our daughter to this 3-year-old's birthday party. And some of the parents just show up and they just fucking leave their kid. Like, what time you want me back? 4? All right. And they leave. And I'm like, wait, we can do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're using this as a babysitter right now?
Yeah. Well,
That's wild
and the
to me.
point is that they're 3.
Yeah, that's
It's
what I'm
not
saying.
like
Not
they're
10.
It's
12.
not 8 or 9.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, good.
3.
I'm gonna go take a nap. You're like, no. This is 3. This is still like all hands on deck.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's you got kids. It's like the other parents. That is that's one of the catastrophes of being a parent is the other parents. They don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care or they care too much. So by comparison, you're the worst parent ever.
Right. I see that guy leave and I'm like, I ain't doing so bad. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
I'm pretty good.
Yeah, I'm going to eat some Little Caesars.
I'm pretty good.
Okay, so you're using comedy to sort of ingratiate yourself in this new community.
Yes. And then
are your parents together at this point?
Yes. Yes.
Everyone's together. All 8 of you then.
Yes.
Okay.
And but it was definitely there's conflict, and I'm the youngest of 6, and my different siblings are reacting differently to this move. Like, definitely the move. It's so interesting because when we walked in and you're describing the premise, I didn't realize that it was such a life-altering thing for me and my siblings, this move, because it was a culture shift, and it was just kind of like, it's one thing to fend for your own when you were raised there and you knew every neighbor, but like when you're kind of thrown in there, and it was a different thing. And I think my mom was miserable initially, so that was traumatic.
Well, I'm surprised to hear too. So I know about Gary, Indiana, but I didn't know about Eastern Europeans being there. I didn't know about even a Mexican culture being there as well.
Well,
so you think
it's
a
Rust
lot
Belt.
But are a lot of them trickling down out of Chicago? A lot of people too.
Yeah,
like just
some of
them,
them, but some of it is like the Rust Belt. If you consider, like, Detroit is where all the cars were made, and Pennsylvania was where all the steel was made, and then. But like Northwest India, like Gary was like the first of the Rust Belt to die. Like supposedly Gary in 1938 was considered the most beautiful city in the world. Yes, I think it was in Time magazine. And so Gary, like, white flight had been so immediate and dramatic, and it was so overshadowed by the collapse of the steel mill industry and the automotive industry, and people had left, so like that people had kind of like, people would literally they would drive from Chicago through the Indiana part where I'm from to get to Michigan, because Michigan was beautiful and people had their summer houses there. But like where I'm from, Northwest Indiana, was this strange stepchild that was not accepted by Indiana and not accepted by Chicago. So it was a weird thing to kind of, I think it affected everyone that lived in Northwest Indiana.
So who or are both of your parents very Catholic? Was it dad, mom? Where's the Catholic upbringing?
Well, my dad was the first one to go to college in his family. And he was, and I, if I understand this correctly, so like it used to be if you were a kid, a poor kid or whatever, you would go into the seminary. Like he almost became a priest, but I think I realized later on that you go into the seminary so that you can get free higher education. And so he went into the seminary, got, a free education, and then switched, then went to college. But it's weird. It's like, it's kind of, but Maryland was created as this state for Catholics. Like they're let's stick all the
Catholic,
let's stick all the Catholics there. It's Maryland. They're obsessed with Mary. You know what I mean? We'll call it Maryland. And all the Catholics are like, all right, let's go here.
Let's go there.
And Lord Baltimore was, I think it might have been, I should know this because it's interesting, but it was kind of his whole idea, I think. And I think also the Jews went there too, because they were like,
there's a big Jewish population
where like we don't have to deal with these, because by the way, and I did that finding my roots thing, both sides of my family were, and to answer your question, neither of my parents were that Catholic. Like my dad was kind of it was kind of a way to get out of Springfield, Illinois. And then my mom was kind of a cultural Catholic. But both sides of my family, when they did this finding the roots, like one of them, my mom's side of the family settled in Maine. And then during the Know Nothings, where they would literally just kind of hunt down Catholic priests and kill them, they kind of fled to the most western part of where settlers had been, which was Iowa. So my mom's from Iowa, and then eventually her dad got a job in D.C. But my dad's side, they came from Ireland, and they worked in coal mines in Pennsylvania, and then they worked in coal mines in Springfield, Illinois. And so it was generation and generation of working in coal mines. And my grandfather was the one that kind of broke it by making dentures. So
is that what he did in DC?
No, but that's my mom's side of the family. They had, when they went to Iowa, I think they like opened a store or something. But it's just so weird that like Iowa was the western frontier at one point. It's just bananas. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's as far as anyone got.
It's like also, they could have gone, they probably could have gone to Maryland, but they didn't, So I don't know.
So your dad sort of used the seminary the way some people use the military then.
Absolutely.
Education, all that.
Yeah.
And then said, I'm out of here and I'm definitely going to have sex, and I'm going to have 6 kids.
Yeah, I'm going to have 6 kids.
Yeah.
And, but he was, it's weird, like the era of my parents being, the Catholic Church has understandably been decimated. But during the 50s, there was the most important person in a small town was not the mayor. It was, particularly if it was a Catholic community, it was the priest.
Right.
So like you literally are kind of, you never have to pay for a meal. Like it's like the appeal of being a priest, which is so understandably tinged, was the most highest status position you could have in a community. Mm-hmm. It's so weird how that got.
That picture I have out there of the old Baltimore Colts all kneeling down before a game has the priest in there with them before they go out. You got the priest. You think about the Rocky movie before he goes to drive to his fight. He pulls over and he yells up to the father and he's throwing some blessings out the window before he heads off. Yeah, you're right.
It's so interesting. It's, so I would say, but when I was thinking about, pivotal moments and probably the biggest, I think I lost my dog when I was 13.
How?
Or maybe, we think the neighbor was dealing with like raccoons and so they put poison out, but we don't know. Some of it is dogs just eventually die. It's tragic.
What kind of dog was this?
He was like a mutt,
what was his name?
Buttons.
Yeah.
And he smelled horrible, but that was like the first thing in my life that had been this, like I was in shock. I was like a mess. And, my siblings were kind of like, it was interesting because they dealt with it differently. I think I was a sensitive child. No, but it was, it's weird, it's like, in some ways, it's like I probably didn't process it that well, but I remember being caught off guard by it. But when I was so I grew up in this family my father was the first one to go to college. It took us tons of generations to get to the middle class, upper middle class. So the concept of you sought security, and security was wearing a tie to work. And so And I was the youngest, and all my siblings had kind of studied, Spanish terrorism and, just ridiculous. And so by the time I was getting ready for college, my dad was like, "You're studying finance or accounting." And I was like, "Yes, sir." You know what I mean? Like I had been very compliant, and I played football, my brother, but I mainly played football because my Irish twin brother, who's kind of,
You have a twin?
well, no, he's like
Irish twin.
maybe,
Gotcha.
15 months older than me. And, we just were dressed identical for the first 12 years of our lives. And but he was the athlete, but I just kind of went along. So in other words, I always had this attitude of like, all right, you want me to do this? What am I supposed to do? I would just listen. And so I studied finance thinking, no, that's what you're supposed to do. This is it. And I hated it. And so then when I was 24, 25, my mom died, and it was just like,
whoa. I wasn't expecting you to say that. That's young.
Yeah. And so
What
it
happened?
was ovarian cancer, and it was pretty, and again, it was just, one of those things where it was, I don't think I processed it well. But what I was conscious of was that the story that I had been sold, or the life rules that I had been sold, which is get a job with a tie, do that till you're 65, play golf, and then you can kick it, is kind of a lie, because she was only 53, and it was
It's young, yeah.
And my dad was the boozer, and it was like there was just incredible injustice that this would happen to this person. So that made me kind of reevaluate, or even, I guess, think about what I wanted to do. I think it's not rare for people to just kind of go, I don't know, what, like they just follow people, right? Like often people don't really consider, like, what do I want to do? Like I remember in high school, there was a point where I think a teacher was like, you guys should think about what you want to study. And I was like, well, and I was like, you know what? And I thought of things I was interested in. My dad was like, what are you fucking kidding? You're not doing that. And so, I mean, granted, my parents paid for college, in full disclosure. So it was like he did have some authority in it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It wasn't like I was paying. So, but yeah, so that was the big, I would say that was the big life event where from then on, I challenged kind of everything. And I think that is the kind of the through line of all comedians, is kind of challenging the acceptable notion. And it goes in different stripes, but that's why, we're all kind of conspiracy theorists, mm-hmm. We're all, highly suspicious of basic rules, right?
It's so funny you say that, because it wasn't until, this might have been in the last 4 or 5 years, I was in therapy, and I was talking about, I don't know, dating or whatever, and she said, "Are you jealous?" And I said, "I'm not." I said, and she goes, "You're not. You're suspicious." And I go, "That's fucking it." I haven't been able to throw that out myself the whole time. Go, that's what it is.
Yeah,
I'm suspicious of everything. I'm like, I'm always, right. I've had no parents since I was 16. Wow. And I'm very suspicious of people. I'm very suspicious of intentions. Yeah. Very fucking suspicious. It's not jealousy, or it's a little bit of distrust or but suspicious is the right word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, and by the way, I mean, that's kind of necessary for developing a point of view in comedy. Like I had, material on Mexican food, and it's just, Mexican food, which is my favorite. It is, you should be suspicious. It's essentially the same ingredients in just with a different name.
100%.
It's
refried beans, like Like
it's
you're
just
gonna
like
refry them,
there's
they're delicious.
like
I
it's
love
like a burrito and a taco. It's not that different.
yeah, especially if it's
Right?
flour. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the same thing.
It's the
It's
same.
just a bigger tortilla and more
It's beautiful.
ingredients.
It's perfect, but it's just a different name.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, but that's where I think, I'm so grateful that, doing stand up, that we get access to that. Do you know what I mean? Because it is, some of it is we get to, there's a communication with the audience and not everyone gets that. I look at my kids and I'm just like, they got to process all this stuff.
There's no quick fix for anxiety and depression. All right. It's not finding a new therapist. It's not starting a new exercise routine. It's not more and regular meditation or a better diet. Sometimes you just need to unlock your brain, a new way of thinking about and seeing the world. And maybe that thing is guided ketamine therapy from Mindbloom. There's a new tool to improve your mental health. It's at-home ketamine therapy. Mindbloom is the leader in at-home ketamine therapy, having safely helped thousands of people overcome their anxiety and depression. Unlike traditional talk therapy, ketamine works quickly and doesn't have the unpleasant side effects of traditional antidepressants. In a study of over 1,200 Mindbloom clients, 89% reported improvements in their anxiety and depression after only 2 sessions. Right now, Mindbloom is offering my listeners $100 off your first 6-session program when you sign up at mindbloom.com/honeydew and use promo code honeydew. Take the first step and break free from your anxiety and depression with Mindbloom. Mindbloom.com/honeydew and use promo code honeydew. Now, let's get back to the do.
Before we start, we were talking about the haircut thing.
Oh, yeah.
I want to bring this up because in this special, Dark Pale, so like there's been times when we were talking about, you have your person, you go there every 2 weeks, which is what an intelligent,
Tara?
what an intelligent, thoughtful person does. And I'm the kind of guy who, when I try on shoes, people are like, "How does it feel?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know.
Right.
This is my shoe size. I guess they fit." And they're like, "You just feel your feet." I'm like, "I don't know." And so, but when it comes to getting a haircut, because I love acting and because I was broke for so long that I got in the habit of I would wait and get a haircut when I would get an acting job or a commercial or something. Yeah. And so I would never have to pay for a haircut.
How long has your hair been at its longest in between gigs?
It's blonde. My hair is...
You look like Ben Franklin.
I don't have much hair, but it was like definitely, like thin blonde, white blonde hair. It doesn't look good in a mullet. And so essentially, so I never really, there might be times when I'd establish a relationship with someone cutting my hair. And in fact, there is this guy who's cut my hair in the East Village, who's great. And I used to go to him, but sometimes I call and he has, of course, now he has like 5 businesses. He has his barbershop, he has his edible business, he's, all this stuff. And so if I call and he's not there, I have to, because I don't plan ahead. I'm like, I got time for a haircut. Hey, is Ari there? No, he's not. All right, I'll go to this person. So I went to this, where my sons had gotten their haircut. It's this old Italian guy who cuts hair. And it's in the East Village in Manhattan. And there's Italian Americans and Italians that come to this guy. I'm like, this guy's real. He's a real
authentic.
And so I'm like, all right, great. Cause I'm getting ready for this special. I need a haircut. And so I go and I call and I go, can I get a haircut? And they're like, cause it's in the middle of the day. Cause we have this weird schedule where like we're free at 1 p.m. And, most barbers, people come after work or at lunch. So I call and they're like, yeah, come on in. They're like, come on in. Yeah. And so I go in and the old guy who's cut my son's hair for forever is not available. But there's this young guy that works with him. And I'm like, well, he's his trainee. He's great. And, the old guy's with scissors and, he's talking to his friend who's reading an Italian newspaper. And I'm like, I'm set. So I sit in the chair. And the young guy takes out, like there's some people that just cut hair with like a trimmer. He's like,
clipper. Yeah.
And so he
that
starts.
was my barber. Tara's all scissors.
Yeah.
All scissors.
And so he starts cutting my hair. But again, I'm like, this is it's a haircut place. It's not a barber shop, but it's like, this guy knows what he's doing. But the weird thing is like my hair, I don't have much of it left. You
got plenty of hair up there, bro.
I got a nice flesh yarmulke. But it grows out kind of like this. And so like, what you have to do is you have to kind of cut underneath it. I'm getting to a point. So then I'm trying to communicate to this to the guy. I'm like, it's like my hair kind of underneath here. You have to trim it, or other I'll get like these clown edges. And he goes, yeah. And just goes, vroom, vroom. And I'm like, and I go, that's not what I said. And so you'll see on my special, Dark Pale, that my hair.
Wait, this is the haircut you got for
this
the
is
special?
The haircut for the special. And so the hair.
The trainee haircut.
I look at, during the edit, I'm just like.
Can you guys do something with the hair?
And I'm like, geez, that hair looks bad. So you'll look at it, and I'm like, good God.
It's forever, too.
And I was
ridiculous.
Yeah. And so it's just, you'll just see it, and you'll go,
I can't wait to watch now.
His hair looks like shit. And it does look like shit. And that's literally, I got a haircut like 4 days before. And it was just a bad haircut. It's just, because you told your great story about.
Oh, man. That lady dyed my hair, and it turned out black as these microphones, man. I was like, what are you doing? Do you want to dye your eyebrows? No, I don't want to do that either.
And so, by the way, I had a thing where on the Jim Gaffigan show when I was doing it, because I have blonde hair, but essentially when blonde hair, when you get old, essentially it doesn't turn gray, it turns white.
White, yeah.
Like Andy Warhol white, right? And so what happens is in acting projects, the director of photography is like, you got to do something to your hair, man. It hits the light, and blonde hair is really thin. So the light hits it. Like you can do the Mike Pence thing where it's really tight to your head, but if you have any hair standing up, it catches light and it kind of flares. So essentially, this guy who was the director of photography on this show, the Jim Gaffigan show, he goes, I don't want to overstep my boundaries, but like your hair is like, it's like invisible. It's like you just got to dye it blonde. Which doesn't seem noticeable. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And so we go, my wife was the showrunner, and she goes to the hair person. She goes, yeah, we need to dye his hair blonde. And so this is similar to your story. So then the guy dyes my hair, and he dyes it red.
Red.
and so it's kind of strawberry blonde. And so I don't know anything about like hair dye or anything, but apparently like, blonde is type of it's a shade of red or whatever. And so we did it, and I was like, this is kind of red. And he's like, no, it's not, that's blonde. And so I go, and so then I'm like, all right, I'm dumb, so maybe it is blonde, but I see red. So then I go out and I show my wife, and she goes, your hair's red. And I'm like,
like he just said it was.
So then we go back in. We're like, it's red. And he goes, it's blonde. And they're like, so we're like, all right, fine. It's red. It's blonde. But can you make it more blonde? So he does it again. And I don't know if you've had your hair dyed. It's like your skull's like stinging from this dye. And so then essentially it's still strawberry blonde. We just reinforce what this guy views as blonde. And so on my IMDb page, like they have characteristics, like it would be, and one of them, it says strawberry blonde hair when I don't have strawberry blonde hair. It's just like, I'm not even a redhead. I'm not even a redhead. I've been this blonde my entire life. It's called champagne blonde. No, I've been this But I just thought that was funny because it's, not only we've all gotten bad haircuts and we've all, people with the best intentions will mess up, but like now it was like a characteristic, his pale skin with his strawberry blonde hair. And I'm like,
strawberry blonde, so specific.
So stupid.
I want to go back to talking about your mom for a second.
Yeah,
can
sure.
we? So ovarian cancer, I'm assuming you guys, that was a slow thing and not sudden.
Yes.
Were you able to see your mom? Were you still there at the time?
Yes. I was living in New York. It's before I had started stand up. But I remember, there was something about, I was kind of such a, so it was, my family's not good at processing things like that. So we would talk, but it was, I remember because I graduated from college and I moved to.
Where'd you graduate?
I went to Georgetown.
Oh, wow, dude. Damn. Hell yeah.
And
we got a Hoya at the table?
But
were you there when Ewing was there?
I was.
You were?
Transferred in.
Okay.
By the way, that's the school my dad went to. My dad went to Georgetown. My older brother, my kind of Irish twin, went to Georgetown. I had after Buttons died, eventually we got another dog. That dog was named Hoya. I had always wanted to go to Georgetown. I applied, didn't get in. So it was like, not only did I not get in, I had a dog named Hoya. And so
two relatives.
And so it was
giving you all money. Yeah.
It was pretty, but that kind of rejection, that appetite, because I think the entertainment industry is about, it's not just about how you handle success, it's how you handle the constant humiliation.
100%.
And if you don't have a bit of an appetite for shit, you're going to have a hard time.
Amen.
Do you know what I mean? And so
real quick, where did you go first? What college?
Purdue.
All right. So you went to full on Purdue, not IUPUI?
Purdue.
All right.
Purdue. But, by the way, so I applied to all these colleges, didn't get in, got waitlisted at some of them. But back then in 1987 at that time, you could apply to Purdue by submitting a postcard. Because I was an Indiana resident.
I see.
And I just submitted the postcard and I got in.
So now why transfer into Georgetown? Was it a fuck you because you really wanted to do it? Was it one of those things you thought you should because dad and brother had done it?
No, it was definitely.
Because you could have gone anywhere.
It was definitely, I knew that I wanted to get to the East Coast. I loved Indiana, but I think when I was a teenager, I didn't love, I love Indiana now, but like, as a teenager, I was like, there's been a mistake. I'm not supposed to be here. Like I would look around and I had a friend of mine who now lives in Maine who we used to talk about like there was some kind of disaster, that we ended up here. And so then, of course, I eventually get to New York City after all this stuff. And I'm like, I made it to New York. And everyone in New York's like, you're the most Midwestern looking person I've ever seen.
You're like, it's strawberry blonde hair.
I was like, so it was like, but I think a lot of comedians, that is, they're constantly struggling with identity in some ways. Like they're trying to either, it's a cranking of a dial on the identity. It's either, like we were talking before, it's like, I love Dave Attell, but it's like, you'd think, like, if you know Dave Attell, you'd think, what is this guy? Is he from the 30s? Did he grow up with the Bowery Boys? It's like, he came from a nice community on Long Island. He's authentic, but like some of it is, there's different identities of comedians. You know what I mean? Like they crank it up or they crank it down. You know what I mean? And some of it is, it's thrust upon you. So in other words, the reason I'm, people are like, you're the most Midwestern person in the world is because I look Midwestern. And so when I would go on stage in New York City in the early 90s, all of these comedians would go on stage and be like, my mother's Jewish, my father's Italian, da, 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 da. And so when I got on stage, I was like, I I was like, I'm white and I'm white. And there's, I'm Irish, but like not really. You know what I mean? So there was, my ethnic identity was Midwestern or, trash. You know what I mean?
Are there any conversations that you had with your mom that still stick with you or stand out before she passed?
Oh, yeah. No, there's
anything she said to you, any advice or anything she even just said to you, anything she admitted to you or told you? Did you get one-on-ones? There's 6 of you.
Yeah, no, there was plenty of time. I mean, never enough time, but like there was definitely conversations. And then, by the way, then there's, I don't know if anyone who's lost someone through like, say, a losing battle with cancer and they're on pain medication. What they're saying on pain medication, you kind of sometimes give that a weight that you shouldn't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So where you're like, is she talking about Saturday Night Live to me? Or did she just, is it Sunday and she was watching it last night? So, but for me, it was, I think my mother was somebody, she was the one person in my life that was, I had no doubt about her love and support. And, some of it is like, my dad, there was a bit of combativeness with my dad. He was, there was a fatigue. He had 6 kids. He's like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Another one?
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? And so like there was, and he was of a different era. I describe him as the pre-Phil Donahue era. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was.
Phil kicked all that talk show stuff off.
You know what I mean? Like he was like, and he was a compassionate guy and he was, progressive for his era, but he was like, definitely like, I'm not making dinner. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I brought the money home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not, the chaos is, and he wasn't, again, for his era, he was like very much, he ended up running this bank in Northwest Indiana and he made a point of making sure, like hiring the first vice president that was African-American, and people were not thrilled about it, but he also did that, and he did it in a way where it was like he knew it was important. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like I do give him credit for, but there was also other stuff where he was just like, just really set in his ways. And
was he older than your mom? About the same age?
A couple of years older. Yeah. A couple of years older.
And how did he change when your mom passed?
Oh, I mean, I think that he was like...
Was he a little lost?
He was a little lost.
Yeah.
He ended up getting remarried. But you have to understand, my dad was... And I thought, growing up, you think all parents do this. But like, my dad would come home and have a vodka and on the rocks, and then he would switch to scotch at a certain point
of the evening.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, because half the times I would be like, all right, I'm trying to bring dad a scotch. You know what I mean? And, like, if I have like, so he would, over the course of the night, at minimum 3 or 4 drinks. Like, if I had 4 drinks in a night, I would be like a mess for a couple days. And he was just fine. Like that generation knew how to put it away.
Yeah.
But also it's just like, I think of like the sheer amount of money wasted.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, so like there is, and it was just like a different era. It was like before Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Yeah, seatbelts, all that stuff. It was, you could drink and drive. You could do it.
Yeah, he was in a drunk driving accident. He's like, sorry.
Sorry.
And it wasn't like there was no public shame.
Right. Yeah.
It was just like,
it
was just, and then later on, he, I think he stopped drinking. He went to AA, but then when he, got sick, he's like, if I'm out, I'm going to have some cocktails. So like when he knew he was dying, he went back to it.
No.
Yeah.
He said, fuck it. So he knew, did he get cancer as well?
Yeah. My parents were consuming, he was 63.
Still young.
But he was, he was consuming at least 2 packs a day.
Cigarettes and alcohol. Yeah. 3 drinks and 2 packs a day.
Just like it was, it was a sheer amount of, and he also, when my mom died, he, like growing up poor, he, steak was such a, like you would have it on special occasions. So, and he would, we would have steak maybe once a week. But like when my mom died, he's like, steak every night.
Yeah.
We're having steak every night. And I'm like, all right, steak again. And now I'm kind of like
keto and shit. Already.
Now I'm like, yeah, he was right.
Yeah,
he was right. Yeah. You know what I mean? But yeah,
so when he got the news, he was like, I'm going back to drinking. Why not?
Yes. He was like, I'm done. So.
I gotta say, I think I would too, though. You know what I mean? If unless they're like, hey, we were wrong, you're like, oh shit.
Well, it's also, I think it was
thing. Cancer's gone.
Yeah, it was also one of those things where I think it was lung cancer and cancer that was gonna get to the brain. It was not a happy road.
You watched both your parents pass from cancer then.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. So, but I think in my family.
How old are you now?
I'm 57.
And are you?
Isn't that insane?
It is insane.
Are you
staying? I'm 50. But my father died at 42, and it was very weird when I hit 42 because I actually I clotted then and almost died at 42. His age, same situation, but I made it. And then now I still feel, I don't care if I live to 103. I'm never going to feel older than my dad. Does that make any fucking sense? Like, I know I've lived 8 years longer than that man did on this planet, but anytime I think of him, I still think of him as an elder. You know what I mean? He's that senior figure.
It's so crazy because I think also in my family, like I grew up maybe to the age of, I think my grandmother died when I was 10. But when I was born, the 3 other ones were already dead. Like in my family, people go out early. Yeah. And some of it I think is the partying. You know what I mean?
Are you watching your health? Are you at the doctor's? You look great.
I mean, no, but thank you. I mean, but I'm not.
You're not getting your yearly physical. You're doing at least that.
I'm doing that.
All right.
But like I also, and I don't know how I dodge this, but like I have a very addictive personality, which is, and but my addictions, it's like food, nicotine gum I'm addicted to, but like.
Did you used to smoke?
I did a long time ago.
You did?
Yeah. So I'm addicted to the gum, but like it's, I'm 20 years on the gum.
Are you really?
Yeah. And so.
Could you stop the gum?
I could.
Have you ever tried just going regular gum?
5,000 pounds in a day. I just need to be chewing. You know what I mean? So I mean, it is a compulsive, it is, but but I'm so thrilled that I dodged the booze. You know what I mean? Like the booze is just like, if you look at my family history, it's like, it takes people out early. You know what I mean? So I think, and it also, obviously it could be any drug. Right. And so it's terrifying having kids because I'm trying to communicate them. I'm like,
with fentanyl now, I was corrected this weekend in Appleton, Wisconsin by a doctor. I always say fentanyl. And he said it's actually fentanyl.
Oh, really?
Like NyQuil, not like Tylenol. I said, all right, I'll try to start saying it right, but I keep hearing fentanyl everywhere. But that's what scares me. My daughter's 8, and we see it on the sides of buses. And a good friend of ours' daughter was died from it. So there's been no hiding. You had asked me earlier too if my daughter knew I smoked cannabis or anything, and she does. After the hospital stuff, and they told me that's all I was allowed to do.
Yeah.
I sat her down and I was like, listen, you're about to get an education on marijuana that no one in your class is probably going to get. And I recorded the surgeons talking about how it can be used as medicine and everything. And I was like, these are the doctors saying this. So people don't, if you ever say anything about your dad and they're like, he's a loser for smoking weed, whatever it is, the truth over here. So,
oh, wow. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I played that for her and let her listen to that. And, there was no way to hide it. She said, what happened to your friend's daughter? And I was like, you know what? We were driving back from Ocean City, Maryland to Philly because we flew into Philly. Yeah. And I was like, we're going to have a real adult conversation. And now we're seeing it on the sides of buses on the way to school and everything. So I don't care that it's a little early. I'm trying to educate her on that because I would be devastated if at 10 she ate a gummy or some shit that was laced and didn't even know it. It's terrifying.
That's what's crazy is that, I mean, I think that it is because my kids are 10 to 19 and there is, in my kids, I live in New York City, but there is something about what's happening because I think it's even scarier. Let me bring up this scary fact.
Please.
Is that there, since these kids that are dying from it, there's shock and shame. And so, as your daughter gets, you only have one kid?
Yeah, her brother's my stepson. But
okay. Yes. And so because what happens when a kid gets older is that essentially in high school or in middle school, there'll be an email that will go out and say, so-and-so, the tragic loss of so-and-so, someone in a different grade, sibling of someone that goes to school. And you'll realize later on, sometimes it was suicide. Sometimes it was, some fentanyl related thing. And what's terrifying is that and you can understand the logic of it. These families are devastated. Like there was a kid in New York City where the parents the kid had gotten into Notre Dame and he, I think he was a partier and he had, they were kind of celebrating, there was some friends that had kind of like a weed pen or whatever. It wasn't even his weed pen. He was like, let me have a hit of that. And he took a hit of it. And then and I don't know all the details, but jumped off a building.
What?
Yes. And so the thing is that, this kid was going to Notre Dame. This kid was not a fuck up. The kid who had the pen and gave the pen, from what I understand, was not a fuck up. He was kind of like, I'm a senior in high school. I've kicked ass. I'm going to get a pen. You can get it so easily in New York City, which is a problem because, of course, among comedians, I spent the last 20 years doing these benefits on legalizing pot and stuff like that. So the problem is like, I think in LA, they enforce it a lot more, but in New York, it's just decriminalized. And so there's essentially, it's the Wild West. But what happens is, so this family that lost this son, the only reason we know about it is a friend of a friend, but otherwise, they don't want to go to the police. They don't want the friend. They don't want them to get in trouble. So what happens is it's not reported. It's not like a gun death.
Right.
It's not like, where they're on meth and they're living in an abandoned house. They are these pretty normal kids that, whereas when we were growing up, we might have drank some kind of really cheap beer that was warm and gotten buzzed. they're getting exposed to like this laced pot
That will kill them.
Yeah. But I think the fascinating thing is these parents, in their grief, it's not like their kid was shot at Newtown or whatever.
Right.
It was this, because teenagers make dumb mistakes. We all did, right?
Listen, if I was a teenager and these vape pens were around, I definitely would smoke them. I'd be an idiot. We had cigarettes, and I smoked cigarettes for.
Well, it's our doctor, and some of it is. This sounds like an exaggeration, but I didn't realize the vape pens. We talked a little bit. The vape pens, and again, I have a highly addictive personality, but like, because you're inhaling oil, it destroys your lungs. So like, there's these kids that have been vaping since the age of 12, and then by the time they're 20, they need a lung transplant.
Yeah. Popcorn lung, some of that stuff they call it. This is what I learned about in the hospital, because I was like, okay, am I done with cannabis? And they were like, you can have cannabis. I just choose not to smoke the infused stuff because it just makes me cough so much more. They told me no vapes, tobacco or THC, like none. No alcohol because of the blood thinners, but no tobacco products, no cigars, no blunt wraps, none of that stuff. Because it's just so much. There's so many toxins in all that.
It's just the chemicals,
yes.
Right?
Yeah. I want to ask you this before we wrap up. 2 questions. One is, how do you keep your parents alive with your children? Like, do you tell stories? Do you have photos around the house? What do you do? I know I have pictures around. I tell my daughter stories all the time. Like, oh, especially if she's busting my chops. I'll be like, no, your grandfather would actually join in on that with you for sure.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because there is part of me that is, my family culture was very much like, don't talk about it. And don't, unnecessary emotion is, it's like these Midwestern Catholics aspired so much to be waspy that they're kind of like, don't deal with emotions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but to answer your question, I mean, my oldest daughter is named after my mom.
That's nice.
And then my son, Michael's named after, he's named after the archangel, but also my father's name was Michael, and I have a brother named Michael. But yeah, it's weird, because I feel like I should talk about it, but it's not part of our family culture, and I regret kind of not having discussions. I mean, but my sons did during the pandemic. There was, when everyone was on lockdown, there was some kind of needlepoint assignment, and I explained to my kids that my mom won some needlepoint assignment. So like, there is family lore that I'll bring up, but probably not enough. And some of it is just, I think in my family, it's perceived as, I don't know, bragging. I don't know. It's weird.
It's so funny. My daughter says that to me. I'm like, did you tell your friends that you did this in the camp or in summer vacation? She was like, I can't, Dad. That's bragging. I'm like, is that how everybody looks at it? Is that bragging? Just telling somebody I went to this? I get it.
Well, there is something, by the way. I mean, I think that, one of the great gifts my mother gave me, my 12-year-old son is pretty good at basketball. But like the family culture of like never bragging and never gloating is like something that my mom kind of reinforced. And then I see myself doing that with him. I'm like, yeah, if you are good, that's good. But like, you don't gloat.
Act like you've been there.
You know what I mean? And there's no need to show emotion. You have the joy inside you if you make a basket. You don't need to rub it in. You have to manage these things. And it's like, if you see other kids doing that, that's fine. But like, You don't do that.
I remember Walter Payton, before he passed, his son played at University of Miami. He was a running back, and he scored, and he got in a touchdown in the end zone. He started dancing and all that shit, and he said he heard this whistle from up in the bleachers, and he looked up, and it's his dad, Walter Payton, and he just went like this. We don't do that shit. And he said, never again. Never again.
I didn't think
You go
in
back and
college
watch
you could
an
even
old-
do that.
You go back and watch old footage of Walter Payton. It was just flip the ball to the ref. After one of the most amazing runs you've ever seen, just act like you've been there before. We're not going to dance and all that stuff.
Yeah.
All right, last question.
Okay.
After everything we've talked about today, I always ask the guest their first time here, advice you would give to your 16-year-old self. What would you tell 16-year-old Jim Gaffigan?
Wow. There's so much. I've been through like 8 different lives, but I would say there's going to be some ups and downs, but you're going to learn from every kind of crisis. Do you know what I mean? And that the humility that you kind of and hard work you approach things with is going to be valuable. Do you know what I mean? Because I think that's one of the things that I was one of those students that like I had to work really hard to get a B+.
Yeah, me too.
You know what I mean? And it's
Me
like,
too.
it was frustrating because a lot of kids, things just came naturally to them. And so things are harder. But that's not to say that I don't have, I didn't have privileges or whatever, but like, that some of those disappointments, like that devastation of not getting in a Georgetown, or the humiliation of those first 9 years of doing stand-up, were in a way a gift, right? I know that sounds corny, like
it's 100% true. I think about all these bad things and then where you are on the other side. I'm like, I guess that kind of had to happen.
Yeah, and it's like if you can be a decent person about it, it's like how you, because I feel like when there's big crisis, like even when the lockdown happened, and now we know it was nothing, but like, it wasn't nothing, but it was like, I wasn't freaking out. I was like, all right. Do you know what I mean? Like, like there is like the more high stress situation I'm in, and I don't know if this has to do with sports, but I'm like, I don't get thrown by it. That's not to say that I'm not aware of the stress of the situation, but I'll get more angry at somebody cutting me off driving somewhere than I am of like, oh, all right, I just lost $100,000. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? I'm not like somebody like, there's been a world disaster that's happened. I'm like, all right, and when my kids mess up, I think they know they can come to me. I'm like, all right, it's pretty bad, but we'll get through this. You know what I mean? And so that's where I would say that the punishment of life is some lessons, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, thanks.
I can't tell you enough how excited I was to have you on here. Thank you for doing this.
Of
for
course.
real. Please plug everything again.
Oh, well, I've got the Amazon special that's on Prime. If you have Amazon account, you probably have Prime. And then I'm in this Max streaming show called Full Circle, which is if you have Max. And then I'm on tour, always coming up with new material. I love it. And I'm doing a handful of shows with Seinfeld, which is surreal.
That is crazy.
You know what I mean?
You
It's
two
like,
out there together. That's nuts.
it's just, but he's also, comedians, the relationship comedians have it's weird because it's like the shorthand, the praise and the amount of shit that we've eaten and talking about comedy, the like-mindedness, it's, it's not like, I jokingly say, well, I wanted to help out Jerry Seinfeld. It's much more of like, I'm excited because after the shows, I get to pick his brain on stand-up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And comedy in general, because he is kind of this Aristotle figure on comedy that he has like a Zen-like approach to it where he removes emotion. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think that we're all kind of, comedy's weird because you have to take things personally to have a point of view. But if you take things too personally, then you're raging against the machine and not doing the job. So
great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
As always, Ryan Sickler on all social media. Come see me on tour. All tickets available at ryansickler.com. We'll talk to you all next week.